Tobenna thought his past was buried, along with the girl he once loved and the questions no one ever answered. But a chance encounter with a street hawker in Port Harcourt, a girl with his eyes and a birthmark that shouldn't lie, unearths secrets long buried. Her name is Blessing. She has no idea who she truly is. What begins as curiosity spirals into a painful unraveling of the truth, betrayal, silence, and shame. As Tobenna digs deeper into the ghost of Grace, he's forced to confront everything he lost and the fragile hope of what he might still gain. Because sometimes, love doesn't return the way you expect it. Tobenna Iweala didn't expect his world to pause at the sight of a child. He was sitting in traffic, bumper-to-bumper chaos on ABA Road, with the Port Harcourt sun boiling overhead and horns screaming like they had a personal grudge. His fingers tapped an impatient rhythm on the steering wheel of his black Lexus, sea humming, windows rolled up. The same old frustration. Same old city grind. He was halfway through mentally composing a strongly worded email to his procurement officer when a flash of movement caught his eye. A young girl weaving through the traffic, balancing a wide tray of groundnuts on her head. One of dozens, maybe hundreds, doing the same thing every day. Street hawkers were part of the scenery. Blurred, forgettable, just part of the urban sprawl. But then she turned, and just like that, the air inside the car thickened, Tobenna's chest locked. The tray wobbled slightly as she shifted her weight, and the light hit her face at just the right angle. That face. The slope of her nose, delicate and proud. The sharp line of her jaw. Those eyes, wide, dark, almost too large for her face, framed by lashes that looked too elegant for a child who belonged to the streets. His breath caught, stuck halfway between disbelief and memory. She looked exactly like Grace, not kind of. Not vaguely. It was uncanny. It was cruel. It was like God had taken a photograph from the deepest pocket of Tobenna's heart and stamped it onto this little girl's face. He blinked, shaken. Sweat beaded on his forehead, though the car was cool. The girl stopped at his window and raised a brow, unimpressed by his gawking. "You want groundnut, Olga?" she asked, tone flat, businesslike. Street smart, unsmiling. Her voice snapped him out of the past. "Yes," he said, slowly. "Give me 2 bottles." She set the tray down with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from necessity, twisted off the caps of 2 used plastic bottles now filled with fresh roasted groundnuts, and handed them over without ceremony. He fumbled for a note and passed her 1,000 naira. She took it, counted it quickly, and was already reaching for change when he stopped her. "Keep it," he said. Her eyes looked up to his, cautious. Suspicious, even. "Okay, thank you," she said, but made no move to smile. She bent to lift her tray again. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Why?" Her small chin lifted slightly, defensive. "I just want to know." She eyed him, then muttered, "Blessing." The name hit him like a blow to the chest. He had to grip the steering wheel with one hand. Blessing. Just like the kind of name Grace would have picked. "Where's your mother?" he asked, his voice thinner than he meant it to be. She shifted her weight, eyes darting toward the rear-view mirror of the car behind him. "I no get," she said. Just like that. No drama. No tears. No explanation. As though she'd said it 1,000 times already and knew it never made a difference, he wanted to say something more. Ask who took care of her. Where she lived. If she had anyone. If she'd ever heard the name Grace. But her feet were already moving. She turned, calling out to the next car, her voice rising above the hum of engines. And then she was gone. Tobenna sat back, barely noticing when the traffic crept forward. Blessing. No mother. Grace's face. His past had just walked up to his window in the body of a 10-year-old girl, sold him groundnuts, and vanished into the Port Harcourt haze. He didn't know what to do with that, but he knew one thing: he was going to see that girl again. Over the next few days, Tobenna found himself rearranging his schedule just to pass that same junction, usually around the same hour when the heat softened and shadows lengthened across the cracked asphalt. He didn't admit it to himself at first. Said it was convenience. A quicker route. But he wasn't fooling anyone. Certainly not himself. Sometimes he bought ground nuts. Other times it was meat pies or soft drinks, things he barely touched but handed to Blessing with a quiet nod. She would take them carefully, thank him in that clipped, cautious tone, and return to her tray. She never lingered unless he asked a question. At first, she barely looked him in the eye. But as the days passed, something loosened. Not quite trust, but a small shift. She began answering him. Short replies, often guarded, always with one eye on the road. Like she was waiting for someone to call her away. Or disappear altogether. She said she lived with her aunt. Just the two of them. No other family. Where's your father? He asked once. She shrugged. I know no am. Auntie say he run when mama born me. And your mother? She didn't answer that one. Just looked away and pretended to spot a potential customer. He didn't push. Another day, he asked, do you go to school? Blessing snorted, the closest thing he'd seen to a laugh. Auntie say business first. School no day put food for table. He tried to chuckle along, but it caught in his throat, dry and bitter. The words made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. She said them like they were scripture, repeated enough times they'd become gospel. He wanted to say something, tell her she deserved better, that her aunt was wrong, but he held it back. Truth had weight. And he didn't want it to scare her off. Instead, he bought her lunch that day. Just jollof rice from a nearby vendor and a bottle of Fanta. They sat side by side on the curb, legs brushing, watching the swarm of cars crawl by. She ate like someone used to rushing, barely chewing. He listened as she pointed out the best-selling spots during rush hour, bridges, junctions, anywhere drivers were trapped with nothing to do but buy. It became routine. Every afternoon, like clockwork, he'd find her. Some days she'd talk more. Other days, barely a word. But he kept showing up. He told himself it was curiosity. Concern. Maybe guilt, but that wasn't it, not really. He was drawn to her in a way that felt impossible to explain. Not just because she looked like Grace, though that alone haunted him. It was something else. Something deep and unfinished. Like a door had been left open somewhere in his past, and this girl. This weary-eyed child with calloused palms and an old soul, had walked through it, and he wasn't sure he wanted to close it again. It happened by accident. A rainy evening, just after he had dropped by to check on her. She slipped slightly on the wet curb, and her tray tipped, bottles scattering. Tobenna rushed out to help her, instinctively reaching to steady her arm. That was when he saw it. On her shoulder, just above the sleeve of her faded blouse, was a faint, crescent-shaped mark. His fingers froze. He knew that mark. He had one just like it. His father had it. His grandfather too. It ran in the Uela family, a trait they had always joked about as their royal stamp. He stared, heart hammering. Blessing, annoyed, pulled her arm away. "I day okay, uncle." She didn't notice his expression. But inside, Tobenna was unraveling. This couldn't be a coincidence. Her face. Her name. Her lack of a mother. Now this. He followed her discreetly that evening, guilt trailing him like perfume. She entered a cramped, two-room flat behind the market, greeted by a woman in her 40s who barked something about missing tomatoes. Tobenna waited until the next day before approaching the stall. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "I wanted to ask about Blessing." The woman turned slowly, her gaze sharp. "Who be you?" "My name is Tobenna. She reminds me of someone. I was wondering if you know her parents." "Her mother maybe, wouldn't concern you." Auntie Grace snapped. "You know, get your own Pekin to worry about. She day here with me." "That one supposed to you. Obby you want carry him go Canada." he tried to remain calm. Please, I just want to know. She looks exactly like someone I once knew. I have reason to believe she might be my Olga. Grace cut him off. Leave here. No be adoption agency we day run. Go find your Grace for heaven, if na there she day. Tobenna took a breath and stepped back. Clearly, this wouldn't be easy. But he wasn't walking away. After that day, Blessing noticed a change in him. He no longer just brought snacks or asked innocent questions. He lingered more. His eyes searched hers like he was trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, as they sat eating puff puff, she said, "Uncle, why you day always look me like that?" He smiled, tight-lipped. "You remind me of someone I once loved very much." She blinked. "She die?" He shook his head. "I don't know." There was silence for a while. Then Blessing muttered, "I no remember my mama face. Auntie no get picture. Just say she give birth and disappear." Tobenna looked down, throat tight. Maybe she didn't disappear. Maybe someone made her disappear. He knew what he had to do next, find out the truth about what happened 12 years ago. If Blessing was who he thought she was, then the real story of Grace's disappearance was buried under more lies than he imagined. Tobenna began to revisit old memories, calling friends from the past. He reached out to Grace's childhood best friend, Amaka, now a nurse in ABA. When he mentioned Blessing, there was a long pause on the line. "You're saying the child has a crescent birthmark?" "Tobenna. I always suspected Grace didn't just up and leave. Her mother said she ran off, disgraced. Pregnant. But it never made sense. She loved you." His chest ached. He had been told Grace left him, without a word, without a trace. But what if she hadn't? What if something darker had happened? And her family had buried it? What if Blessing was the answer he'd been denied all those years? The next weekend, Tobenna drove to Nui, Grace's hometown. He hadn't set foot there in over a decade. The village looked the same, dusty roads, idle stairs, and whispers trailing him. He went to Grace's family compound, only to find her mother gone. Dead, they said. Her uncle, however, still lived there. He remembered Tobenna. "You came too late," the old man muttered. "We tried to forget. Her pregnancy brought shame. Her mother sent her away to her sister in Benin. But we never heard from her again." "She died," the man shrugged. "We assumed. No calls. No letters. Nothing. So we closed the chapter, but Tobenna didn't. Now he had a location. Benin. It took bribes, sweet talk. And a long drive to track down Rose, Grace's aunt in Benin. An aging seamstress with sharp eyes and a tighter mouth. At first, she denied knowing anything. Then Tobenna showed her Blessing's picture. "The woman broke. She gave birth in my parlor. Grace. She was so young. She kept asking about you, even in labor. I told her to forget you. That your kind never marry girls with shame." "Where is she now?" Tobenna whispered. Rose looked away. "She died. Fever. 2 weeks after childbirth. I sent the baby to her cousin in Port Harcourt. That's all. I thought I was helping." Tobenna left in silence. But inside, his heart was roaring. Back in Port Harcourt, Tobenna sat in his car outside Grace's flat. He had never hated anyone more. Grace had died heartbroken. Alone. And Grace had raised Blessing in ignorance, snuffing out her past. He asked Blessing to come with him the next day. "Just for a drive," he said. They stopped by a lawyer's office where he quietly began the guardianship process. She didn't understand yet. He wasn't forcing it. But he wanted her safe. As they drove through the city, he asked, "Do you want to go to school, Blessing?" She nodded. Wide-eyed. "Then you will. You deserve everything good. You're not alone." Not anymore. It took months, months of careful questions, hushed investigations. and gnawing doubt that kept Tobenna awake long after the city went quiet. But the truth came, not in a dramatic revelation, but piece by piece, like puzzle fragments falling into place. A faded photo unearthed from an old wallet. A slip of a memory from a neighbor. A torn letter hidden in the lining of a handbag. And finally, a DNA test that confirmed what his heart had already begun to accept: Blessing was his daughter, the daughter he never knew existed. The daughter no one had told him about. The daughter Grace had carried in silence, then left behind when she died under circumstances Tobenna hadn't been brave enough to revisit until now. He stood in court on a humid morning. The ceiling fan groaning above like it, too, was tired of secrets. Grace's cousin, the so-called aunt, didn't put up a fight. Maybe she'd known the walls were closing in. Maybe she was just relieved. Either way, she stood with her arms folded and said nothing when the judge signed over custody. Tobenna remembered gripping the edge of the table, trying to stay upright as a dozen regrets surged up like floodwater. Blessing moved into his house 2 days later. Her tray of ground nuts was gone, replaced with books, pencils, and a backpack that still had the tag on it. She walked through the rooms like a ghost at first, uncertain of her place, her fingers hovering just above doorknobs as if waiting to be told not that one. He gave her space. But he also showed up, at the breakfast table, after school, outside her room with warm milk and awkward small talk. At night, she started creeping into his study. Quiet as air, she'd slip in while he worked, curl up on the leather sofa with her knees pulled to her chest, and ask questions about Grace in a voice so soft it barely stirred the air. Was she kind? He nodded, the lump in his throat forming like clockwork. The kindest person I've ever known. Was she beautiful? He smiled, tired, tender, broken. She looked just like you. Sometimes, she didn't respond. Just sat there, letting the silence settle between them like a quilt. Other nights, she asked more: what her mother laughed like, what food she liked best, what song made her cry, and every night, as Tobenna watched her fall asleep in that chair, her face slack with dreams and old sorrow, he felt something shift in him. Something he hadn't thought possible. He had lost Grace. But through Blessing, through her stubbornness, her questions, her guarded hope, he had found the part of his heart he thought he buried with her.